My name's Nancy Curry. I am the granddaughter of John Allen Campbell and my grandmother, Ela Estelle Campbell. And this is my husband, Dan Curry. And we're here today to record facts. Some things that are probably nearly facts because over the years they've probably been embellished and changed a little bit. And then just some plain memories of my grandmother, Ela, and my grandfather, John Campbell.
And I would say with that, your grandfather was a very interesting character. He served as a farmer. He raised, 5 children, he and Miss Ela?
That's right.
But a couple of the most outstanding things in the community would be, not only was he a deacon in the Baptist church here, but he also served as the manager of the election polls for the Rockbridge district for a number of years. And he also served as the justice of the peace here in the Rockbridge district. Right. Tell us about some of the things that you witnessed, from marriages to the garnishing of wages to court and all this kind of stuff about your grandfather.
Just as important as the things that Papa did, but we need to sort of talk about what Mama and Papa meant to the community. They lived on a house which is now Laurel Falls Drive, and it was at the end of a country road, a farm road, and it had a huge porch across the front. And almost any time of the day, when you went to their house, there'd be people there to visit. And then at night, people would gather from the community would gather in and tell stories. And that was Papa was easygoing and peaceful kind of fella, so it was easy for people to come and talk to him. Yes, Papa was did lots of different things. At one time, he worked in a cotton gin, which we were thinking was at a little community called Caleb, which now everybody says Caleb. He worked in the cotton gin. During World War II, he worked at Bell Aircraft, and then he was a farmer and raised cotton and raised chickens, and as you said, he was the justice of the peace. Lots and lots of times we would go to Mama's and Papa's, and somebody would call and say, "Mr. John, can you marry us?" So they would come scooting down that road, and Papa would marry them. Or people would, Papa was a wise man. They would say, come and ask him for advice. And you were talking about the Papa having court. I'm not sure what kind of court, because he was the justice of peace. He would have court, and if anybody's familiar with Centerville community, there's U.S. Auto, and then right behind U.S. Auto was a wood-framed courthouse, and Papa would take his knife and tap on the table, and call the meetings to order, and then he would be in charge of the polls. And at the end of the election, he would come out and he would say, "Hear ye, the polls are now closed." It was wonderful. He was a good Christian man that a lot of people had faith in, and was a great influence on all of us, yeah. And then there was Mama. My grandmother was a strong, family-oriented mother, and she loved to sit on the front porch and talk about the news, talk about the gossip too. She had even back then, she had a cottage business. Mom and Papa had milk cows, and most often Mama would milk, and then she would churn the milk for butter and buttermilk, and then she would sell that. Even people from Atlanta came out to Centerville to buy her milk and butter, and she was able to earn enough money to put the bathroom in their house, because their house didn't have a bathroom at first. So Mama and Papa were both strong people. Papa, the first house that we know about that they had, and I'm sure there were probably others, he had they had the money to build the house, and he had it almost finished, and the crops failed that year, and he lost everything, and they had to go back to be sharecroppers on a farm, Mr. Booth's farm, and then they were able to buy the house where I grew up, and Mom and Papa had 5 children. I'll count as go through. The oldest was Fred Campbell, which was my dad, and Daddy was in World War II, and then there was Jewel West. She married a gentleman from Dahlonega, and they raised their children in Dahlonega. And then there was Johnny, and Johnny was also in World War II, and he was the lone survivor in a bomb that went into the tank where he was serving. And then there was Aunt Susie Mason. And so Mom and Papa raised all those boys and girls. And
I believe there's another one, Clark.
Yes,
Who
Clark.
also was in
Yes.
World War II.
Right, and he was killed in a car accident in Centerville.
And I think that after the death of Clark, his accidental death in an auto accident, the insurance policy from the federal government, I believe,
Right. Made it possible for Mama and Papa to build that house.
purchase
Right.
the house where
Right.
you grew up. Yeah.
Right.
Very interesting people.
Yes, they were very simple, very quiet, peaceful people. But when I look at our family now and I see the different things that people in our family have done, they had a powerful influence on a lot of people.
And here in the Centerville area, your grandfather came from a very large family. There were 5 boys and 4 girls?
Let's see. I think there were 13.
13 altogether.
Yes,
Okay.
13 brothers and sisters. And when there's a gathering of Centerville community, and the
A lot of
people,
representation there.
yeah, a lot of people from that family.
Of course, your grandmother, she grew up over in the, as we would call it now, Caleb. I mean, that's the correct pronunciation. Back in the day, we called it Caleb, but over in that community, I believe, and the Lenora community.
Yes. My grandmother grew up on a farm, which is now
Lenora
Park. Mhm.
Yes.
And Papa grew up right here in Centerville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our roots go way back here.
Go back for a long way. I know we've got pictures of your great grandparents, and which would be your grandfather's parents.
Shady and James, I believe.
James, is that it?
James Walker Ford.
James. That would be your grandmother, James Walker Ford.
James William Campbell and Shady Ann Clower were Papa's mom and daddy. And then the Ford family was James Walker Ford and Eufaula Cannon.
Okay. A lot of history in that family. A lot of changes since that time. But anyway, that's some interesting stories about your family.
Yes. Dan, tell us what it was like to grow up as a little boy in Centerville community.
It was great for me. We lived right on 124, not far from here, as a matter of fact. My father, he was a country barber. He had a job in Atlanta, and he would cut hair on primarily in the afternoons or evenings, actually, or Saturday afternoon it would be. And a lot of people from all around the area would come. Their kids would come, so I always had a lot of people to play with and whatnot. And not only would he cut their hair, but it was almost like he ran a zoo as well, because we had all different types of birds and pigeons, cats, dogs, even in later years, donkeys and ponies and calves, things of this nature. So I was kidding someone recently the fact that you come and get a haircut. And by the way, back in the old days, my father only charged like 10 cents a head. I think probably into the 60s it was on maybe 50 cents a head for a haircut or whatever. But you could get a haircut and also tour all the various pens and see all the pigeons and doves and canaries and finches and all the various birds and what. So it was an interesting place to come. So people were often coming there to perhaps trade chickens. They had, people would want what he had, or he would want the type of chickens they had. He even had chickens that laid colored eggs. We called them Easter egg chickens. But it was an interesting place. And there's always people in and out of the house. Also, my grandmother lived with us, and she came from a very large family. And there would be a lot of people, especially on weekends, Sundays, her nieces and nephews who lived in the area, or maybe some would be visiting from Florida somewhere, but they would come and come by and see their last surviving aunt. So people were always in and out of the house. My mother, every Friday, or maybe if not on Friday, on Saturday afternoon while my father was cutting hair, she would bake a cake or some pies or something, because she knew that on Sunday there'd be entertaining guests. So they always had sweet tea for them to drink, coffee, fresh coffee in the pot, and some pastries for them to eat. So it was very interesting around the house, especially my dad there in the barbershop, because there could be anything from with preachers and deacons there. It could be talking about the church, or it could be talking politics. So it was interesting.
The two stores were probably major parts of the community. Tell them about some of your experience going to Mr. and Ms. Juhan's and Mr. Brannon's store.
The two stores there in town was at that time Lavender Juhan. He and Miss Elsie, they had a store where U.S. Auto is today. And then there was what they call the Mill House. It's set between the two stores, and the smaller store up on top of the hill, which was owned by Colbert Brannon. And that store, the Brannon store, was typically the hangout for all the retired farmers who would sit out there on benches out in front and tell their tales. And or hunt. In the wintertime when it would be cold, the hunters would come in there and they would talk about their plans for the next day they went, or next time they went hunting, or tell about their last trip hunting and all their bragging rights of what they had killed and whatnot. So that was a very interesting place. Here in Centerville, pretty much what the places that you had that were that drew the community. Of course, you had the two churches. We had Zoar United Methodist Church and Rockbridge Baptist Church. Those were certainly centers of the community. We had the school itself, the old Centerville Elementary School that you and I both attended. A little footnote about that. Back in the day when you and I attended Centerville Elementary, you know, the first grade class was in a room all by itself. The second and third grade class were together. You recall that? So, you know, the teacher would be working with the second grade and she'd have the third grade, you know, studying, you know, and then she'd flip it, and these folks would be, the second grade would be studying and the third grade would be having her attention. And of course, that was the second, third, and the fourth and fifth. They were together. The sixth and seventh grade were together, and then the eighth grade again was by itself. And I remember back when I started school at Centerville, this would be school year 1955, 1956. We didn't have indoor plumbing back then. They still had those old outhouses. You remember those? We're not going to talk about outhouses too much, are we? But anyway, we had those outhouses. We also had pot-bellied heaters in the classroom. I know this sounds like something that seemed like Abe Lincoln should be somewhere in the story, but he's not. But the upper guys, the guys up in the eighth grade, would come and they would bring our coal in on those real cold days. And if we had to go to the bathroom, now, man, you couldn't do this today. You'd be locked up, and the teacher would be locked up in jail for this, sure enough. But she'd have a screen of some sort over in the corner with a potty. And that prevented us from having...
For the first graders.
For the first graders. Now, I don't know about this. But by the time I got in the second grade, they had upgraded. We had a boiler system in the school, and we also had indoor plumbing. So things had become a lot more modernized. But I remember that my first grade year, how country we really were. But what we was talking about, oh yes, and and other centers of the community. We had the two stores, which was Mr. Brannon's store and Mr. Juhan's store. We had, obviously, as I said earlier, my father's barbershop. That was certainly a gathering place in the community. And right across the street, a lady by the name of Sarah Johnson. Sarah had ran the Centerville beauty shop. And that was certainly a place where the ladies gathered, and they would have their hair cut and curled and all this beautician type stuff done to them. So that was sort of and of course then your grandparents' place too. That was always a place where people gathered. Times have changed a whole lot since we were kids.
Peaceful, comfortable time.
It was. I was speaking, had lunch with a good friend of mine who grew up here in the area a few months ago, and we both agreed that at the end of the day, there was not a better place to have grown up than right here in Centerville.